I want to speak to amendment number 34. And I want to just, really emphasise that I think there's something slightly disconnected happening here with the attempt to remove the ban on evictions. And as has been previously said, the reason the ban on evictions was brought in was to protect public health in the middle of a pandemic. So really what has changed? We don't know where we're heading with this. We don't know yet if there isn't going to be another spike in COVID that will run rampant through all sorts of congregated settings, possibly even the schools when they return. And this isn't an attempt to scaremonger, it's an attempt to be real, Minister. And if you were being real, you would recognise that if the emergency period is extended, then the provisions in the emergency period should remain. And in particular, I would argue this one, because I genuinely believe, and I'm not just picking this out from my deep and innermost thoughts. I actually have people coming to me on a daily basis who are so fearful and insecure of the ban on evictions being lifted, not because they're in rent arrears, quite the contrary. They're up to date with their rent. They're not actually having a problem with finances. It's because their landlord, prior to COVID, had either issued a notice or had indicated that their tenancy was coming to an end due to various reasons, possibly to sell, to move a family member in, to refurbish. There's a whole swathe of apartments in Inchicore in a place called Emmett Court, which are due to be emptied in order to be refurbished, with dozens of families potentially being moved out of them. Now, when we were originally debating the bill, we put in an amendment to strengthen the provisions that were already in it, which was voted on and voted for by your party as well, by Fianna Fáil, and I'm sure you at the time as an opposition spokesperson on housing. And that is the subsection 7, which basically stated that notwithstanding anything else, that all tenancies, including those which are rent-a-room, which are licensee tenancies, a specific focus on the travelling community, on council tenants, that all tenancies would be covered by the ban on evictions. Now, if this amendment falls and the other amendment falls, what will happen today is basically from the 10th of August, the floodgates on evictions will open up. There will be a tsunami evictions, not necessarily on that date, but following that date. And if we end up in a situation where there's a massive increase in the number of families moving into homelessness, children, etc., moving into homelessness, then we're going into a very dangerous situation in the middle of a pandemic. And I think that there's something kind of missing from your brain if you really think that this is acceptable. It is not acceptable to do this to people. It is not acceptable to put them through this fear and insecurity and the potential of having to go into an emergency accommodation while we still haven't suppressed the COVID-19 virus. And so I think it's really, really serious. And every deputy in this House needs to really consider what button they hit today, because when you hit that button, you're opening that tsunami come August on many, many families who are already terrified of what the consequences could be. And it just doesn't make sense, because as Minister for Housing, you're going to be faced with the fallout from that. And you're not going to be able to cope with it. Just like the last government, because of the type of housing policy they have adopted, they were not able to cope and are not able to cope with an emergency and a housing crisis where people are being pushed into homelessness on a daily basis. You don't have the housing stock to provide for people who are going to be evicted. And what you're doing is you're giving yourself more problems, but you're also, more importantly, putting the population at risk. And some of them the most vulnerable members of our communities. You're putting them back at risk, and their children. You have no right to do this. And like I say, I repeat, every deputy, and particularly those in the Green Party, really need to consider what button they push when they vote on this, because it is outrageous to even contemplate the idea that landlords could evict after the 10th of August on all sorts of grounds. And you're focusing on the question of arrears. Fair enough, but it goes way beyond that. And we spelt it out in subsection 7, and that's why we have this amendment in. Remove the date of the 10th of August, allow the emergency period for a ban on evictions to continue to January 2021, and also allow the subsection that we had inserted with your support, with your party's support, at the beginning of this crisis to remain in the bill.
Thank you, Deputy.